2nd of January, Australia's state New South Wales declared a state of emergency due to the ongoing forest fires. Due to conflagrations, nearly 3 billion animals and 25 people died. 6th of July, Japan was burdened by severe storms. Streets turned into rivers and bridges are washed away. 58 people died as a result of the floods and landslides. 25th of July, off the coast of Mauritius, an oil tanker stranded on a reef and spilled over 1,000 tons of oil into the island's waters. As a result of the leaking oil, 40 dolphins washed ashore, dead. 11th of September. Wildfires have been raging into the US for quite some time now. The states of Oregon and California are heavily affected. 500,000 people are being evacuated in Oregon. 22nd of October. Because of high temperatures in Siberia, 3 million square kilometers of water that normally completely turns into ice in the month of October now still remains open. 1st of December. Deforestation due to forest fires in the Amazon is still rising. It has now reached the highest level since 2008. More than 11,000 square kilometers of forest have been lost in 1 year time. Do you realize that all the things that I just mentioned happened in just 1 year, in 2020? And did you realize that these episodes cannot be called incidents anymore and that we live in a climate crisis that needs to be solved? 2020 is however dedicated to the coronavirus. The virus has impacted our lives by taking away our freedom. We feel more lonely and desperate in this uncertain time. But what if I said that the Earth is experiencing the same feeling, but for more than 200 years? Even though the corona crisis showed some interesting behavior regarding climate change, by for example flying less, the effect can be compared to the proverb, een druppel op de gloeiende plaat, which means it is just a drop in the ocean. It only removed 0.01 degrees from global warming. So how can we do even better? My name is Eva Rietveld and I believe that we as a society can achieve more together to eventually make the world a better place. In this video I would like to show you how our society reacts to the climate crisis and what we and you can do to work on this. Do you want to live in an ecosystem or an ecosystem? So what is climate change? Climate change is a long-term shift in global or regional climate patterns. If climate change is increasing, it means that the weather patterns due to storms and hurricanes are less predictable. Climate change is a natural process. However, the current climate change is being caused by human activity. An example is the global warming due to our production of greenhouse gases. And because of us, climate change is happening much faster than it normally does, which means that the Earth has not enough time to recover, so a lot of problems start to occur. We do the damage. So how can we make sure to undo this damage and bring back Earth's balance? That's a very difficult and broad question to answer right now. So let's start small. I want to go back to the moment when I started to work on this issue myself, that started this research. So where did it start? As a person myself, I started to have an interest in this topic about 1 year ago. After watching documentaries like Planet Earth and Consumerist, I started to feel the urge to change bits of my lifestyle. Stopped eating meat, became more aware of the materials I bought and consumed, and I started to open myself up towards buying secondhand products. And doing these things gave me the feeling that I helped bring back climate change in a very small matter. I wanted people to do the same. However, I noticed that not everyone agreed with me. They did not want to change their lifestyle and eat less meat, because they simply just like the taste very much. When hearing this, at first I felt frustration and anger towards these people. Do you then not care about the Earth and its nature? However, the more I talked to people, the more I started to realize that we just all have different opinions, perspectives and interests. And that is why this topic, solving climate change, is so hard to solve. After realizing this, I decided to widen my perspective, be open towards all information and do more research into the unknown. So no, I'm not going to tell you to eat less meat or fly less. I will tell you something else that you may have done already, but not intentionally, to help solve the climate crisis. So where did my research start? Let's talk about companies. Companies are positioned in the market sector, and this market sector has a lot of power. It influences decisions and choices of consumers. This sector mostly exists out of commercial organizations and companies. Their purpose is to sell goods or services for the purpose of making profit. And the more profit, the better, and the more successful you are. So then we see success as being wealthy for money instead of doing good to others or the earth. This idea of success is because, according to clinical psychologist and Professor Paul Verhagen, we learned from an early age to be competitive in our working environment. This made us constantly be on guard for other people, which created a neoliberal economic system, which everyone is focused on their own characteristics and qualities. Although many institutions, schools, and workplaces can benefit from such a strong dose of independence, they tend to prioritize independence as a cultural ideal. That makes less room for example, collaboration, which focuses on achieving a common goal for the group. Society started to go towards a more individualistic culture instead of a collectivist culture. Through independence, we cultivate our personal preferences, needs, and interests. That doesn't sound bad at all, right? However, because we focus on our own development, we forget that working together is also important, which stimulates common goals and eventually creates a community. Furthermore, this way of working is focused to constant excel and growth, which only results in more competition, which leads to more pressure. In order to reduce climate change, we need to focus on the horizontal type of leadership, in which not everyone is the same but equal. Verhagen says that we need to move from a vertical type of leadership, top-down approach, and need to invest in this new way of working, otherwise it will never be solved. To me, it kind of makes sense. Reducing climate change is a common goal that we need to work on as a community. In order to create this community, we need people that are willing to work together and see each other as equals. Well, according to Fenne Verhoeven, who is the co-founder of Bank 15, a horizontal society is not possible. Bank 15 is a social business that connects talents to commercial organizations to achieve a win-win for both parties. According to Fenne, we will never stop seeing money as our motivation to become successful. There are always going to be big companies that want to earn as much profit as possible, so we will never reach a fully circular/sustainable economy. So she does think that we can make this world a better place by working together with these commercial organizations, use their funds to set up new sustainable projects, but that they can still earn money out of it. She says if more people will start to use this kind of business model, we can together make a difference. So for me, it was nice to see that Fenne had this very different perspective about the sustainable movement that I never heard before. She does not want to change the whole world, but still has a social business and a sustainable business model that inspires commercial organizations to do the same. So then we can still use the horizontal approach by collaborating together in various ways, just like Bank 15 does, to create new business models that indirectly contribute to working on climate change. Well, what do these big commercial companies think of this? These organizations are already becoming more sustainably aware. Companies are realizing that modern consumers start to value sustainability more and prefer a product that is less damaging to the earth than one that is not. They now adjust their production process to a more sustainable and slowly a circular one. According to Willem Brandt, head of Unilever's home care department, the real problem lies with the consumers. 70% of Europe's consumers see climate change as a bigger issue than COVID-19. However, a relatively small amount of these consumers want or is willing to buy a product that is ecologically better but more expensive than a product that is just a bit sustainable but cheaper. This means that the consumers are already satisfied if they buy a product that does just a little bit of impact. So when I heard this, the following question popped up into my mind. Why should companies then invest money into products that not a lot of people will buy? This made me realize that this process is a lot more complicated than I first thought it was. I first thought that the commercial organizations had all the power to decide what comes into the market. But if I listen to Willem, I can conclude that consumers need to become more sustainably aware in order for companies to start doing the same. For my research, that means that I need to find more information about consumers and their behavior. I did some digging and I found that there's more to this story. Companies certainly do play a big role in what the consumer decides to buy or do. So when did we start being the consumer? Consumerism started to appear around 350 years ago. Companies played the biggest part in making consumerism a huge societal phenomenon in which the consumption of goods and services became a very important task for most people in society. They did this by making marketing and advertising strategies. It is when companies took buying goods and services to the next level. Now, in the modern consumerist society, people are unaware that they need a product until the product is forcibly brought to their attention by the media. It is where impulse buyers start to appear. These things make consumerism harsh, destructive, and unsustainable. The danger of the modern consumerist society is that it affects the individual in a number of ways. It affects the psychological and spiritual health through erosion of the true self and replacing it with a false self that brings fake identity, and through erosion of humans' connections to nature and replacing it with the consumption of goods and services. We can say that modern consumerism is affecting our well-being, but also our view on the world. We lost focus of value to nature and the earth, and in order to solve climate change, sustainable consuming is then not enough. We need to consider adjusting our human behavior, lifestyle, and culture to bring this perspective back. I came to understand that companies do have this control and power over consumers. I believe that commercial organizations do not realize that their power is bigger than they think. This process has a very long history. Consumerism became a normal phenomenon in society in which no policies start to act upon it because it's normal. However, the danger should not be underestimated. I believe that we need to bring these things to the table and find out how we can be more aware of our consumer behavior and the amount of control that companies have over people. Only then we can build a better system and a more sustainable one. So what now? And what can you do? So after hearing all this information, changes have to be made in the market sector, our society, and also the government. You may think that there needs to be change everywhere in our system, and that is true. I believe that the answer lays in the fact that we need to move from an ecosystem that we are in right now, which refers to individualism and capitalism, to an ecosystem in which we live together and value others' well-being and nature. We need to rearrange ourselves and start to collectively speaking about our views and opinions more as a dialogue instead of only working separately on what we think is best and only for ourselves. Instead of the minimalistic innovations, just in one sector, we need maximalist innovations that involve multiple sectors together. We need system change to decrease climate change. So what can you do? Sociologist and philosopher Ruben Jacob says that you as a person who is part of this process can achieve this by bringing back your political voice. In this apolitical time period, we tend to forget that our voice has more power than we think and that sectors start to react to the things that we have to say. I believe that if we want to create a system change, we need to start with people that live in the system. COVID-19 has exposed weak points of the system, and now it's your turn to speak up. From this research, I gain a lot more about how the system and the climate crisis works and how people of various sectors with different perspectives operate. In my final expedition, I would like to dedicate more research into the last part. So how can you use your political voice to make a contribution towards system change, indirectly also climate change? I would like to focus then more on the younger generation, in which I already did some research on, but not specifically into this topic. It is where I start to make a small social change that will lead to a bigger system change, also known as the butterfly effect. The question is now, are you in with me?